Today we are going to be talking to you about the history of the periodic table. First of all, we need to start with some information about the lives of the main influencers and creators of the periodic table. The first scientist we are going to be talking to you about, and probably the most well-known formulator of the periodic table, is Dmitri Mendeleev.
Dmitri Mendeleev was born in a small Siberian town of Tobolsk on the 8th of February 1834. He had a tough childhood as his family was quite poor and his dad was dying. His father became blind in the year Dmitri was born and died in 1847. After his death, Dmitri's mother turned to a small glass factory owned by her family in a nearby town. Dmitri was passionate about chemistry from a young age, and his deepest wish was to find a way of organising the elements.
He pursued his dream, and he is now a very well-known creator of the periodic law and the first version of the periodic table. He arranged the elements in rows using their atomic masses. Mendeleev published his first periodic table of the elements in 1869. In his creation of the first ever periodic table, Mendeleev left gaps in his table to place elements that were not known at that time. Also, by looking at the chemical and physical properties next to a gap, he could predict the properties of the undiscovered elements. Mendeleev wrote the atomic weight and the properties of each element on a card. He took the cards everywhere he went. While arranging these cards of atomic data, Mendeleev discovered that what is called the periodic law. The periodic law is a law that states the elements, when listed in an order of their atomic masses, fall into recurring groups. Mendeleev inspired many scientists, and his work is still admired up until this day because of the impact he has had on chemistry overall.
Our next scientist we are going to be focused on is Johann Wolfgang Dobereiner. Dobereiner was born on the 13th of December 1780 to a coachman, which means he had very little opportunity for formal schooling. He was apprenticed to an apothecary and began to attend science lectures. He studied chemistry at Strasbourg. Dobereiner is famous for the work that foreshadowed the periodic law for the chemical elements.
Dobereiner was the founder of some properties of some very key elements of chemistry, such as bromine, chlorine, and iodine. He found the properties of these elements and was able to make a comparable graduation of the properties. Dobereiner discovered that the relative atomic mass in each triad was close to the average of the relative masses of the other two elements, and so this gave other scientists a clue that relative atomic masses were important when arranging the elements. Dobereiner is also well known for inventing the first lighter, which was known as the Dobereiner's lamp.
To make this lamp, Dobereiner used his chemical knowledge. The lamp was a jar that housed a reaction of zinc metal and sulfuric acid. This reaction caused an element called hydrogen to escape as a gas. This gas is flammable. When the valve on the top of the container was opened, a jet of hydrogen gas was released and sped up by platinum metal.
John Newlands was a British chemist who put forward his law of octaves in 1864, in which arranged all the elements known at that time into a table. Newlands was born on the 26th of November 1837 in London at West Square in Lambeth. His father was a Scottish minister and his mother was Italian. He was homeschooled by his father and later studied at the Royal College of Chemistry. In 1864, John became an analytical chemist.
John Newlands was most well known for putting forward his law of octaves in 1864, in which he arranged all the elements known at that time in a table in order of the elements' relative atomic masses. By doing this, he found out that each element was similar to the element 8 places further on, and therefore created and discovered his law of octaves. He stated that every eighth element has similar properties when the elements are arranged in the increasing order of their atomic masses. Newlands compared the similarity between the elements to the octaves of music, where every eighth note is comparable to the first. John Newlands' law of octave was shown a pattern between some of the elements in the periodic table in later years showed a huge significance in the development of the periodic table in the 19th century.
Our final scientist that we are going to be telling you about in this presentation is Henry Moseley. He was an English physicist and chemist who was born on the 23rd of November 1887. He was born in Weymouth, Dorset. Both of Henry's parents were both from very well-educated families. His father, who was also called Henry, was a professor of anatomy and physiology. Henry Moseley was educated in private schools and then went on to get a scholarship at Eton College. Henry also fought in the war, which is where he eventually perished.
In 1913, Henry Moseley used a self-built equipment to prove that every element's identity is uniquely determined by the number of protons it has. This discovery that Henry Moseley made 2 years before his death revealed to many people that the true basis of the periodic table, and this discovery enabled Moseley to predict confidently the existence of 4 new chemical elements, all of which were found. He also proved to the world that the major properties of an element are due to its atomic number. He established the relationship between the atomic number of an element and the charge of its nucleus.
Finally, we will give you a little bit of knowledge about the history of the periodic table to summarise what all of these incredible chemists achieved. Many chemists had always looked for ways of arranging the elements to reflect the similarities between their properties. In the modern periodic table, it lists the elements in order of increasing atomic number. However, historically, relative atomic masses were used by scientists to organise the elements. This was mainly because the idea of atoms being made up of smaller subatomic particles like protons, neutrons and electrons had not been developed yet. Nevertheless, the basis of the modern periodic table was well established and even used to predict the properties of undiscovered elements before the atomic number was developed. The scientists we have talked about before are the key influences and creators of the periodic table, and each one of them played a vital and important role in the development of the periodic table as we know it.
Thank you for listening to our presentation.